4. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, oh Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Dun dun, love that track by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada disciple. Hare Krishna, welcome to Vaishnava Voices. That background, it's not a very great background, is it?
You're a bit lighter than me.
Yeah, we got like our letters and bills and things on the back. Normally we have our green screen, and do you want to put the green screen in, and we'll see if we can get it to go.
Okay, maybe it's best that way.
Yeah, put the green screen in there, behind the scenes. Okay, I'm going to do some live fudging with the camera stream in that case. Keep moving it in. Yeah.
Done?
Yeah. Look at that. Okay.
A little bit of a play.
Okay, let's do this. So if I go, you can say something while I'm doing this. Welcome people to the stream.
Oh yeah, welcome
to the episode. Tell them what we're going to talk about. I'll do that.
I don't know what we're talking about, but I think we're talking something interesting.
No, you know what we're talking about. I just created it with you.
I already forgotten. So we're talking about how powerfully being a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we already discussed it in the previous episode. What it means to be in a cult. Did we? No.
Okay, that looks really weird now.
I know.
Because there's like two things. I'm going to bring it up so people can see it.
All right.
If I switch to this camera and then actually turn it on, now you'll see what we're seeing, which is this weird thing which has...
I have my double
vision. Crazy.
I have my sister behind.
I think I know why it is. I've got like two cameras turned on. There we go.
Got one. Yeah.
Yeah, that looks a bit better, doesn't it? How's that?
Yeah, it's good.
How to powerfully participate in the Kṛṣṇa cult. So in our last conversation, we were talking about, like the basic point there is that we assert that it is inevitable for human beings to be in a cult.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that you're not in a cult, that just means that you're fully brainwashed into one. That in itself is a radical proposition right there. And, you might like disagree with that, and that's okay. But I think that it's worth examining it, because I didn't even realize that myself until I started really examining. And then I was like, hang on a second. This is actually, would I say true, factual, actual? Once you get that, everything falls into place. It's kind of like when they got like gravity, and they could understand, the movement of the heavenly planets and the, projectiles on the earth with the same equations.
Mm-hmm.
A similar kind of thing. Yeah. So anyway, just take that. That's where we're starting from. It's inevitable for human beings to be in a cult. And if you are that you're not in a cult, that just means that you're fully brainwashed into it. It's when you are that I'm in a cult that you can actually be responsible for your participation in the cult. And you can never not be in a cult. People who think that they're not in a cult are simply not being, well, they don't have the opportunity to be responsible for how they participate in the cult.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things also, like, they're not fully aware. And not only not being responsible for it, it's just like maybe they're just like in denial that they're actually in a cult. And what happens when you're in denial is just like you push aside or you try to hide it.
Remember, you got to speak up because we're using the microphone on the computer.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So crank it up.
Yeah. So becoming aware that you're actually in a cult, and then what kind of cult are you in? What is the major things in that cult that you are repeating and you're doing the same thing as other people? It will take you, like, you will become way more aware. What are you actually doing? And also why you're doing the things you're doing. So it's going to open a different level of awareness. Not only that you are in a cult, also what is the main theme of that cult that you are following. And is that giving you a satisfaction, or it's just like it's normalized so you feel like you're not out of place? Because the problem is, when the thing is, like, yeah, there are different cults, right? One big major cult and small little cults here and there. And you being outside one particular cult and going to another cult, you will feel like out of place. And then you will try to go back to the other cult because that's like a comfortable space, for you to be. But it's still, there is something there that is not satisfying you in there. You're just doing it because you're doing it, because everybody else is doing it. If it's comfortable for you.
Yeah. The idea that there's like a secular non-cult world, it's part of the cult brainwashing. It's just another cult that you're in, but they've brainwashed you so that you can't see it. But we wanted to particularly talk about powerfully participating in, let's have a look at we got some comments here.
Yeah,
Truth Rising TV, who tuned into the previous episode. Mate, last week I said we were all going to have a religious experience orchestrated by the cabal. Did that just occur? Trump, hand of God, real or orchestrated? Yeah. Yeah, you called it. You definitely called it. Let us know what your predictions for next week are in this episode. Chris Clark says cult, which shares an origin with culture and cultivate, comes from the Latin cultus, a noun with meanings ranging from tilling, cultivation, to training or education, to adoration. Yeah. Good. So cult and culture, they come from the same thing. The same root, means the same word, to give rise to something, to fertile soil for something to grow.
Yeah.
And then the kind of pejorative term of like cult, which it has come to be, like a bad term these days. I mean, we spoke about that in the last episode, that, I assert, take it on as a hypothesis and look at it, that has been part of the same kind of psychological operation as turning conspiracy theory into a bad term.
Right.
Taking a word and then giving it a bad term in order to, as part of the cult, as part of the brainwashing, that you are not in a cult. A cult is a bad thing. You are not in a cult. Being part of this cult means not being in a cult. There's only one way to not be in a cult, and that's to be in this one cult that brainwashed everyone into it. So I think there's some, like, okay, who's the intended audience? Like, who would get the most out of this? How to participate powerfully in the Kṛṣṇa cult?
Well, I guess, like when it comes to religion, I think people are just demonizing religion as a cult and don't go there. It's a no area to go because whatever, brainwash in this area and you're not going to be yourself. when in fact it is just like opposing religion, what God created for human beings. And by opposing that, and by, let's use the word, demonizing that, the other cults are basically distancing themselves, so people feel like, oh, I'm comfortable in this area. And they won't go into this like religious or spiritual environment because they are, what do you call this one?
Well, en español.
It's given a bad name.
Yeah, and so.
And nobody wants to be part of that group, like where they have a bad name, right? Bad reputation.
So when someone comes in to join the Krishna cult, because they've been brainwashed into cults are bad, you're not in a cult. They don't want to join a cult because they've been conditioned that way. So one of the ways to, get people to join the Krishna cult is to pretend that it's not a cult. And then the person joins, and if you ask, like, Western converts to the Krishna cult, are you in a cult? They'll say,
no.
Yeah, they'll say no.
I'm not. What are you talking about?
I'm not in a cult. In which case, you're brainwashed, because they have been brainwashed. So the brainwashing, it's actually, what it's done is it's disabled their ability to participate in a cult with responsibility. And so when they join the Krishna cult, they now participate in the Krishna cult with no responsibility. They're not able to powerfully participate in a cult because they were not powerfully participating in the cult that they just came from. They've been disempowered in their participation in this atheistic secular cult. They don't even think it's a cult. And they'll only join something if it's not a cult, because they've been conditioned that cults are bad, stay away from them. So, these other cults now have to present themselves as, oh, we're not a cult, because to say that you're a cult is a bad thing. Whereas I say that saying that you're a cult is simply saying it how it is, including the general cult that everybody is in that they don't know that they're in. Something you want to say?
I guess there's some price to pay in that. Let's say A, is pretending they are not a cult and vindictively calling out on the religious or spiritual group cult. There is something that they want to win in here. Not only is the association, the spiritual association of these people, also materially these people will become a bit more, way more powerful with a higher awareness.
If you look at people like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, they actually have a lot in common with people who there was the New York Times article, like, where did Justine go? Something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it was about the young lady, Justine Payton, who joined the Krishna cult in New Zealand. And then she went to America and she participated in a center in Philadelphia there. And then during COVID, she kind of
got sick.
She got sick and she had a bad experience, and then left, and then was like, I'm traumatized by my participation in this cult, right? And then there's lots of others. We saw others. There was Chris Feaches, I Was Once a Hare Krishna. There was Lavanga Kelly's
Lavanya Kelly.
Yeah, Why I Left the Hare Krishnas. So they kind of have this revelation that, I was in this thing and now I'm not, but then if you look at Assange and Snowden, and like that Australian Army major who brought the case against the government for abuses in Afghanistan and then was like thrown into a maximum security prison for it. They demonstrate some of the similar things, that they realize at a certain point that they're in a cult. And then now they're like, ex-cult members and they're being persecuted. But the thing is that, part of how that cult functions is if you try to leave that cult, man, do they go after you like anything. The Krishna cult doesn't go after people who leave in that same way.
They just bless them.
Yeah. I mean, people leave and then they'll post a thing on there saying why they left, But yeah, they demonstrate some of the same kind of like patterns and thoughts. So people come in, they think it's not a cult, they say it's not a cult, the Kṛṣṇa cult I'm talking about now. Then at a certain point they go, I'm over this, and then they leave. And then they we already distinguished in the last episode that they've just joined another cult without realizing that they're now a brainwashed member of another cult, just like they were a minute ago. They didn't get that they're always in a cult and they have to be responsible for how they participate. They again bought the propaganda, this is not a cult. It's like, yeah. So anyway, it is a cult, the Kṛṣṇa cult. And how do you participate powerfully in the Kṛṣṇa cult? Well, the first thing is, what does it mean to participate powerfully? I mean, does it mean like, you know, that you become a guru, or like a, you know, you rise in the ranks of the Vatican, you know, and attain power and prestige and become a cult leader? I mean, is that what it means to participate powerfully in a cult? What does it mean? Because look, let's contrast these two things. There's like participating powerfully and not participating powerfully. Participating in a participation that's not powerful. And those are the two options that you have. But what is it? Well, let's look at, first of all, what does it look like to not participate powerfully?
Well, for my understanding is this is like not participating powerfully is that you're not fully aware what are you getting yourself into, and also not being 100% aware or in giving yourself the permission to be in this specific cult, and what are you going to do, how long you're going to spend, how much effort you're going to put, and you know, like being very responsible for your life span. What is important to you, how much time you want to give to make difference in people's life, all of that. When you are fully aware of this and you have like a specific understanding, like how you're going to lead your life, then that becomes more powerful because you know what you're doing and you know what you're doing. So when you get out of that service or whatever you want to call it, then you say, you know what? I did what I said I was going to do. I spent the time doing the things that I wanted to do, and I gained the things that I want to gain out of this. And now I'm going to move into this stage. Could be a family stage, could be like finances stage, business stage, whatever stage you want to do it. But you fully aware what you do in that, rather than just following, right? I guess following also has a little bit of power there, but you know, like blindly doing things, and you know, like a feather being taken by the air, a wind here and there, just, you know, doing whimsically anything. You think you're doing things good and it feels good and you're doing something good, but actually you're not fully aware why you're doing all of this. You know, where you feel satisfaction out of it.
Yeah,
that's my personal understanding how to participate powerfully in whatever a cult, you know, you're doing.
Yeah.
And within that cult, also there are mini cults. So, you know, be fully aware, like what exactly you're doing.
Yeah. I got a great example, you know, that can paint something. It was about 2007 or something like that. A devotee came over from, I was in Brisbane at the time, running an ashram there. A devotee came over from New Zealand, moved to Brisbane. And then I asked that devotee, why are you here? And that devotee said, I'm here because Gurudev told me to come here. You know, he said to come and stay with you here in Brisbane. And I said, okay, I understand that. He said, you know, he said what he said. But then you did what you did.
You accepted the invitation.
Well, he said whatever he said.
Yeah.
And then you did what you did. So my question is, why are you here? And I asked that because if you just go around being like, oh no, I just did it because, you know, he said to do this, then what will happen is at some point he'll say something and you'll do it and it won't go the way that you want it to. The outcome from whatever you do is not going to be what you wanted. And then you're going to turn around and blame him. So what you need to do now, right from this point, is get this very clear for yourself that he says whatever he says, and then you do what you do, including like, I'm going to do what he says, but you are doing that.
Exactly.
He's not doing it. You are doing that. So let me ask you again, why are you here?
Mm.
And then that devotee had to create for themselves. They're not, they, them pronouns, but I'm just like, they did have a specific gender, but they said whatever they said, but it was something which was like they were doing it. It's like, you came here, you can't. There's a story in the Bible of these guys who were casting demons out, and they were casting them out in the name of Jesus and Paul. And then these demons, apparently this is in the Bible in the New Testament, and then these demons say to this guy like, oh, we know who Jesus and who Paul are, but like, who are you? So it's kind of like that. There's this person in front of me and they're saying, oh, I am not doing it. It is like, it's kind of like Guru Dev made me do it. It's kind of a variation on the devil made me do it. It's like, I'm not buying that. You're here. I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the unmanifest within you. But this is what I've observed is talking to these people who are not powerfully participating. It's kind of like there is the unmanifest within them or the unmanifest behind them that is the actual cause of everything, and they're just like a puppet. But they're actually creating that themselves. They're creating, I'm a puppet. It is not me. It is the unmanifest within me that is doing this. They're actually creating that, and they're not being responsible for that. They're creating that. So in that conversation, I had that devotee be responsible for what they were doing. And they wanted to be that, oh no, I'm not doing this. Gurudev told me to do it, and that's why I'm doing it. But it's like, no, you're choosing to be, a brainwashed cult member. And it's okay as long as you are like clear that I am choosing to be a brainwashed cult member. When people are not consciously choosing to be a brainwashed cult member, they just literally are a brainwashed cult member, and they're not participating powerfully.
Yeah, I guess, this is one of the things in some areas of people where they are invited, out of love, of course, they're invited to come to this group, religious group, and because they see that person may have a different journey taking the spiritual life, which is a great thing, because it's the higher life for a human being, the spiritual life. Within that also, there are people materially that are basically, I wouldn't say abandoned, but neglected, I guess. They neglect their material life or what they want to build for their own lives. And when the time comes,
you should move the desk over. So we haven't got enough room here because of the wall. Yeah, point. Yeah.
And when the time comes, like when changes happens and the person realizes, oh, I have to have I would really like to have a family. And then they go into the stage of looking for the potential other, and then they're in the search of the potential other. Then it's way more it's way more clear for the person, in order for me to sustain this, my potential other and the family, I need to have a job, I need to have a career, or I need to create a business, how I'm going to sustain my family, how I'm going to do sustain the needs of my wife and children. So there is a lot more present in that area.
Okay.
And if the person hasn't created itself, hasn't been very clear what they want to achieve in life, what they want to have in life, then it's kind of problematic, because the whole thing comes in one, and it will be quite difficult for them to deal. And the environment won't be that environment. So far, I haven't observed an environment where they said, look, this is the stage that you're going. You gave your service for so many years. Let me give you this much of money. Is there anything else that you need? Let me support you in this way, so you can, at least you have some base, you start up, and then you can carry on with your life.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is one thing that I observed in the Krishna life.
Okay, I got something deeper than that.
Okay, so this is just one thing.
Sure.
You can go deeper.
Yep.
Now, So what happens with these people is they don't have that support, and they become, oh my goodness, now I have all of this to deal with, and I don't have anyone to support me in this. I don't have any support person where I can tell me, you know what, this is what you may be, how about you create this, all of that support group. And they are left with this experience of being left alone to your own doings and to your own faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that itself creates some sort of like a resentment.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I spent 10 years of my life doing this, and here I am, I have nothing.
Okay.
Or a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one of the things as well, like, when you're getting into something, be aware. If you're giving 1 year of your years, 2 years of your time, just be aware, what you're doing. Are you happy with that? You know the result is going to be, when you finish this, you're not going to have anything that you want to have. Financial security, perhaps, maybe housing security, or all of those things. You may not have it. And who is your support group? So that is something that is missing in this religious group, where many people have a resentment,
Well, here's the thing about that. There's like two kind of levels of looking at that. One is this level where it's like, okay, people participate in the Krishna cult in a particular way, maybe an ISKCON or in a preaching center or a community. And then they do all the service, and then they get to a certain point, and then they're like, oh, well, now I need to start a family. So I remember in Wellington at the temple there, this was probably 97, maybe 97, I think, 97, 98, around there. Some brahmacharis came and stayed there, and the temple president there was preaching to them. He was a grihasta. He hadn't lived in a temple himself. He was a grihasta, but he was preaching to them that, you need to prepare for your, for married life, and you need to, develop a career and everything. And ISKCON's not going to give you anything to do for that.
And he was real.
Yeah, he is. So, but here's the thing about it is, it really depends on whether if you are about it, that it's the responsibility of, those authorities or whatever to do that for you. And they don't do that for you. Is there a broken contract there? Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's one thing if they say, you do this, and then at this point we will give you this. And then they don't do it. It's another thing if they never said that they were going to do that. Like, I don't think anyone promises that they're going to do that. And so what happens is people go into this, and it's like, you literally did that. Like in the, where did Justine disappear, or where did she go, or something article, it was saying that, she went out and she collected all the money from the books, and then she handed all that in, and she had to use her own money to buy her toothpaste and toothbrush and stuff. And I was just reading that, and I was like, yeah, but that was a choice. Literally chose to do that. Nobody kidnapped her off the street, tied her in chains or anything. And really what I could understand about the argument that was being made there was essentially along the lines of, this is not a mentally competent person able to make choices. Because the person had made the choices to do that. And then it was like, if someone comes and says, would you like to do this? And then you do it. And then afterwards they say, well, that person was coerced or brainwashed or whatever. At what point does the person have the ability to say yes to anything? If later on they can go back and say, well, I regret the choices I made, but I'm not responsible for any of them. And that's what I say it is to be powerless in your participation, is that at a certain point you turn back and you say, I'm not responsible for the choices that I made, because I assert this. I assert that it's not a retroactive phenomenon. The person is not being responsible for the choices that they're making while they're making them, and they're actually, using this as a way of abdicating responsibility. which is what that devotee was doing. When that devotee came into the house, our house, and was saying, I'm here because Gurudev, I said, I cannot interact with you. You're completely irresponsible. And this will not go well for you. And it's not going to go well for me if I have you here like this, because you will not only turn around and blame him, something goes you didn't want it to go, you'll blame me too. You'll be like, it's a cult and they did this and then I went there and then this happened. I'm like, you're going to be responsible right now. You're coming in here. You're coming in here. Your choice. You have to tell me right now, and you have to to use a landmark term, enroll me. You have to now pitch me. You have to you have to pitch me on why you're here and what you're doing here, because you're doing this and we're doing this together. This is not like I'm some powerless cult member, you're a powerless cult member. We're just all doing whatever we're told, and then in the end we're going to turn around and say, I didn't want to do that. No. We are doing this.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that we're doing. So, the people who become a brahmachari, a monk, and then they devote years to that, they're doing that. Now, when they get to the point where they want to get married, if they have been doing it with the attitude that I'm doing that, I'm telling you, when it comes time for them to get a job and to get a career in that, they just continue doing what they're doing. If they've been doing it irresponsibly, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm just doing what I'm told, they have no agency. Then when it comes time for them to get a job, no one wants to hire them, nor do they have any clear direction about what they want to do, nothing like that. But it all lies within the agency of the individual. So they're not powerfully participating in the cult, and they're not powerfully participating in life, and then that just translates all the way down. And so what the classical kind of response to that is like, oh, the cult is not providing them with everything that they needed. They did so much, work there. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like Param used to be like, when someone was leaving the ashram, it was like, give them some money to get them started on the next phase, and we would discuss that. It was like, in this other cult, they have things like superannuation schemes. They have a pyramid scheme where, people who are coming in at the bottom of the pyramid, their money flows up to the people who are at the top of the pyramid. The superannuation and retirement scheme is basically like a pyramid scheme. You get new people in at the bottom of the pyramid, and then their money flowing into the system flows up to the people at the top of the pyramid who got in earlier. Now, the problem that's happening worldwide right now is the pyramid is collapsing, because pyramid schemes rely on bringing in a wider base than you have at the top. But there's a demographic inversion because birth rates are collapsing. So you have a small number of people coming in at the bottom of the pyramid scheme and this aging demographic population at the top. So before COVID hit in 2019, you can Google this and look for it. You can find out about Brazil's superannuation crisis. Western countries were having crises of superannuation, and they were having to do things like raise the retirement age, and they were having like rioting. They were like, what are we going to do about this aging demographic? And then, coincidentally and unfortunately, there was a flu epidemic that killed a lot of old people in old folks' homes, And then, there seems to be this like decreased life expectancy and excess mortality increased ever since then, which, on the plus side of things seems to be solving the economic problem, but that's just a coincidence. So, the idea that there should be a pyramid scheme built into the cult that will take care of you is more kind of like it being irresponsible about it. There might be some scheme like that where, and that would be a responsible way to manage it. You're taking people's labor, you're taking their life, their years and everything, and then you just responsibly put some of that money aside, self-managed super funds or whatever, and you're investing it in some kind of investments, and then you use that to pay out, brahmacharis when they're leaving the ashram. That's one way that you could do it.
Well, probably not pay out, but like give them some support. Yeah. And I want to speak about this, like, the whole thing of people giving their labor, their time, their ages, their effort, or whatever,
Yeah.
The thing about this is people are open to give their hearts the service because there is something very fundamental here that is very catching for every human being, especially for these human beings that really love to give. They're very what do you call this? Selfless. They have a selfless attitude in them. So naturally, they are very inclined to do that. But what happens, the problem happens is when their love, their contribution is not appreciated, and maybe
And we're back. Not sure what happened there.
I know I've been cut off.
Yeah.
So what was I saying? To this, the thing
People
that you
who have
mentioned.
this desire to help and they're selfless. And
Selfless, they want to contribute, because it's naturally, it's beautiful what the Bhagavad Gita said, in the service, because this is what Krishna wants. And naturally, we're like, yeah, because as human beings, we really want to please someone. In this case, it's Krishna, right? So we attempt these readings with so much soul and determination. And the problem happens here when whoever is in charge of these organizations or local places, in the case of this lady, Justine, her experience, how she has been treated, it actually is diminishing for what she has contributed. And why I say diminishing is she has, given her time and effort and all of that, and going to the extent even covering her own personal cost. And whoever was in this group did not attain the needs of this human being. That is where the problem raises, because the person is like, hold on a second, I'm doing all the things that you are, want me to do for this whole thing to work out and the organization to work and everything to, for us to do for other people. Okay, I'm fine with that. But the way she has been treated, it was not okay with her. Therefore, that created an issue. I know, I understand that you have this, like, we have to take responsibilities. Yes, we have to take responsibilities. But at the same time, we are confronted with this other issue that is, we have been diminished in such a way that we just like, we're going to take the towel and we're going to throw the towel off and say, we're going to collaborate to people. It's not okay. Simply, it's not okay. If someone is giving their time, their energy and service, and you don't treat with the person nicely, then what are you expecting the person to just like lower herself and kiss your feet?
Yeah.
It will not happen, because the person has pride and the person has, the will and the self-respect to a certain extent to get up and say, you know what, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen again.
Yeah. That, I mean,
so that is the other side of the coin. The person who meant to be responsible, at the same time that the other side of the person is the selfless person that wants to do a lot of service, but it did not go
the way they wanted it to.
Maybe not even the way they wanted to, just the way it should be.
Well, no, it's the way they wanted it to. There's no should be about it.
Well, not should, but the way.
It's the way, if you have a
the
look.
way it's like, this is the love reciprocation thing.
Yeah.
It's not a should, but it's reciprocation is I do this and you do this. So I feel comfortable. And if I want naturally to extend myself a bit more and you just want to take, fine, because I'm giving you that chance or that freedom to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Extending myself. But it will be a point when you're doing that and also maltreating the person. That is the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like, if you approach it from market pricing theory, it's just that, the product that they're offering is not worth the price that they're charging for it, because you offer a product at a certain price point, and you have to meet the consumer's demand. And they go, you know what, your iPhone is really expensive, but like, yeah, you know, it's worth for me to spend that much money on it. And they buy it. If you price something too high, then they're like, I'm not going to buy it. It's not worth my money. Or if your features are no good, then they're not going to buy it either. If the thing doesn't work and it's unreliable, people won't buy it. So in the same way, they're offering something to people, and then people are buying that. And so at a certain point, this lady has said, I don't want to buy this at this price. I'm not getting my time and money's worth out of this exchange. This is not, you know, I don't like this. But you see, the crucial thing in that article is really the argument they're making there is that this is not a person who, see, if you buy something from a company and it doesn't work, you're like, well, that sucks, you know, and then I'm never going to buy from them again. But the argument really that they're making in that article is that this is not a person who can buy in the marketplace of ideas or cults. Because this person is traumatized, they're not able to make those kind of decisions. So, you know, that's essentially what they said. I read through it and I was like, this is just it's really just like, you know, there was nothing that I haven't experienced in, you know, being penniless and sleeping on the ground, you know, in a foreign country, you know, preaching the glories of Krishna consciousness, Krishna's name, fame, and glories. The only thing about it was that, you know, they had an experience that they didn't like. They were treated in a way that, you know, didn't work for them. But the crux of the article was because they had been, in quotes, traumatized, they were not a mentally competent adult to choose that. Because if you just join something and then you didn't like it after some time, those people are a dime a dozen. That doesn't get into the New York Times. But what this has been put in the, because I was just looking at it going, how did this get into the New York Times? How is this a news story? Did her parents know someone? Like, Krishna consciousness is not like the 70s, you know, inflaming kind of, you know, all world consuming, expanding cult that it was then. But at the same time, for some reason, the New York Times was mandated, you know, to write an article about that. And if you have the same kind of view of the media that I do, that it's a extension of the, you know, the corporate state apparatus serving the financial interests of the, you know, interlocking financial interests of the owners and the political apparatus, which they also own, you know, through donations and super PACs and all that kind of stuff. Why did they publish this? What is it that they're trying to say? The only thing I could come up with there was that they're trying to say that people who are traumatized are not capable of making those buying decisions. It's like you can have buyer's remorse, you can decide not to continue to buy the product. But further than that, they said essentially she was not capable of making the decision. She was traumatized. So I know that they've introduced this new policy with all of those centers now, because part of the thing was the GBC mandated Devamrita Swami to have like trauma education. And so now, if there's someone who's coming along to the center, wants to participate, is doing service, and has any kind of mental, you know, says, I've got mental health issues or anything like that, then they're just like, I'm sorry, you can't participate.
Right.
That's the outcome of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that is a good step there. It works actually in the favor of people going into these organizations doing like free labor. I cannot speak for her because I'm not on her body and I haven't experienced what she has experienced for me to understand what was happening in her world. Perhaps, you know, what happens is that is the thing, you know, over time they are so in this world of service and all of these things, or, you know, the things they run. If you do this, Krishna, and, you know, it's kind of like, for me, I find it kind of like type of manipulation, you know, like if you leave this world and, you know, like your karma and all of these stories about things, and the person is just like, they become powerless. And because they become powerless, they're scared to make the decisions here, to be like a quick in making decision and being confident in taking, their decisions and doing the right choices here. And perhaps that was the situation, because if there was a person there committed to support these kind of people coming into these religious organizations to see like where you are at, what is happening in your world, is this what you really want to do or you don't want to do, what kind of support do you need, and provide that kind of support, the person could have done very powerful choices, and it could be in a very different pathway right now in the Krishna consciousness still. But she didn't have an experience, and this group of people or these organizations or these temple or projects or whatever you call clubs, no, I don't think it's a club, but anyways, they are not prepared for this.
They are more like clubs. A club is a good analogy to use. Yeah.
They are not prepared in that. So they are only running in this world, like going, doing, and doing, and doing, because this is the thing that we need to do. And by doing that, they ignore or they put aside the humanity, the experiences of another human being. Thinking like Krishna will take care of that, and you just harden up with this and keep going. Great that you're empowering the person, keep going. However, we need to put attention that as a human being, sooner or later that human being will run out of the batteries. And what that person needs is nurturing, support, and to actually know where they are at that moment, what kind of assistance we need to give to this person so they can recharge themselves, they can think through and make the right choices to continue with this or to take off in a different pathway. That's what is needed. And unfortunately, in these clubs, group, organizations, there is some sort of like coaching or whatever, but it's within this Krishna conscious world, rather than like what is actually you need as a human being. What is your mental state?
I don't see those as being mutually exclusive, though. I mean, that's the other thing, is like a lot of people, they're like, oh, they're not trauma-informed therapists. Like today, that's the buzzword, right? Everyone has to be a trauma-informed therapist. Now, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I'm just not into like whatever the latest thing is as a principle. But, having said that, like, the idea that what modern people experience as ADHD is like a trauma response, I think it has some merit, and it's worth looking into and understanding. But, to go back to what you were saying about manipulating people and controlling them through this idea of like what will happen to you after you die. I mean, that's just a classic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even like the idea that you would go to this place called purgatory where you would be punished, and then, then you would get to go to heaven. So you'd be punished for your sins in purgatory, and then you could go to heaven from there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they created this thing called indulgences because they needed to raise money for something. And basically you would pay for these indulgences, and it would shorten the amount of time you had to spend in purgatory. So you could commit sinful activity, pay some money to the church, and then, after death, you wouldn't have to spend so much time there. So it's just a classic kind of maneuver, to the extent that when you understand, the Krishna cult, if you read Bhaktivedanta Thakur's book, Sri Krishna Samhita,
mm-hmm.
in there, Bhaktivedanta Thakur says about the descriptions of the hellish planets in the 5th canto, that these were descriptions that were written by kings in order to dissuade the general mass of people from performing sinful activities.
Mm-hmm.
So they just invented all these things like whatever it's called, I think it's called Kumbhaka Loka or something, where, you have to run on like the whole planet's molten like mercury, and you just have to keep running to stop your feet from burning.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you have to embrace this form of a woman that's filled with, it's like metal form, and it's filled with molten metal, and you have to embrace it, you know. Or you get like hung up on these trees with like massive thorns on them, and then these demons like pull you down, ripping your body. So there's all descriptions of things like this that are they're descriptions of the reactions, you know, in your when you leave this body and the hellish planets that you have to pay for your sinful activities. And then Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he said about that in Sri Krishna Samhita that those were descriptions written by kings, made up to dissuade the general mass of people from sinful activity. Now, at the beginning of the book, Bhaktivedanta Thakur says this book is written for a specific audience, and that's Western university-educated academics. This is not written for traditional understanders of the Vedas. For them, the direct meaning and the traditional understanding is sufficient, and there is nothing wrong with that. And I offer my respects to those readers, and please understand that I'm writing for a specific audience. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said about, you know, Bhaktivedanta Thakur's statement about the hellish planets, that was preaching. That was preaching. So in other words, he was saying that it was a fiction in order to present the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam to a Western audience. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati says that was a fiction. When you understand that it's all made up, then you either become an atheist or you become self-realized, enlightened. But most people get hung up on like, well, is it true or is it not true? The conclusion of all of that is that performing those sinful activities that are prescribed in there are not beneficial for human beings. And we can see what happens to the general mass of society when, you know, people are allowed to just run rampant with sinful activities. It causes degeneration of the moral fabric of the society, and then the social structures fall apart. And then, as Confucius said, when that happens, all economy, everything falls to pieces as a result.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But what I'm saying here is that that these people who are doing that are just doing what people have always done, and that's how cults work. They just tell you, especially if they have an idea of a transcendent afterlife, that, you know, do these things that I want you to do, whether it's give money to the church or not do sinful activities, because after, you know, in your life, and you tell them a story about what will happen to them, and you wrap them inside a narrative that context is decisive. The way that people act is correlated with the way that the world occurs to them. So you control the occurring of the world for people. Now, when you're not being responsible for that, you're in a cult, that is invisible to you that that's happening. Someone can tell me whatever they want about what's going to happen to me after I die. I'm going to go to hell or something. And I'm like, well, you know, whether I believe that or not, like, you know, I still choose what I do based on what I want to do, rather than allowing myself to be, you know, if you don't take this injection, your grandmother's going to die, and you know, it's exactly the same thing that they did there. If you have a non-transcendent cult, like the atheist, you know, satanic cult, that's the predominant one, that uses the science as their belief system to wrap people in a narrative and control it. But, you know, for them, the transcendence is going to the moon and going to Mars. They've substituted that. That's their transcendental narrative. And then also, you know, living forever, immortality in their transcendental narrative is transhumanism, uploading your consciousness to the grid, or getting some kind of like, you know, advanced organ repair and stem cells, and, you know, transmigrating your consciousness into a cyborg, that kind of stuff. They have everything there. Yeah, and so they wrap people inside a context, and they create this picture of these consequences, which is a fictional story, because all consequences are a fictional story. It's a projection into the future, and people who are good at generating those things can get people to do what they want. And this is my point, is like, there is a story to be there is a story around, like, you know, Raja Rishis, you know, godly kings who are not manipulating people for nefarious ends, but they do have to manipulate people. You know, like Bhaktivedanta Thakur straight up says, Raja Rishis, saintly kings, manipulated people by writing the 5th canto to dissuade them from sinful activity. It's just right there. And when you become a cult leader in any of these cults, you pretty soon realize that that's what's going on. And so where things go wrong is capos in the organization start like deviating things. I came back into contact with a part of the Krishna cult that I'd been out of touch with for, a couple of decades. And I saw it had devolved into that. You had individual mid-level leaders, like, really enjoying the power that they had. But at the same time, they were also wrapped up in another thing themselves. But so there's that side of it, which is making sure people are doing that correctly. You're never going to eliminate that. You just can't. Whether you want Anthony Fauci telling it to you or Bhaktivedanta Thakur, someone's going to be selling you some spin story to get you to act in a particular way. So I say about that it comes back again to individual responsibility. You have to realize that you're always in a cult, and there are always cult leaders, and they're always selling you a story. And you just have to be aware of that. So, people who are like, no, you have to believe the Bhagavatam. And if I tell them about what Bhaktivedanta Thakur says, they start freaking out, and the circuit start going, shh. No, it has to be literally true, And then you have people who are the same way about the moon landing. Obviously fake. A whole complete crock. You have to believe it, and then they just like the idea that that's, that the wool's being pulled over their eyes, they can't get it. Anyway, that was a real long kind of piece there.
I know.
But it was riffing off the point that you made, which was that, manipulating people in the Krishna cult by telling them about what will happen to them after they die, and then using that to manipulate people into people doing what they want them to do. So, yeah, my answer to that is yes, that's always going on everywhere, because human beings are always in a cult, and you're always some kind of cult member and a cult leader. And you have to be responsible for your own participation that's happening to you. And then when you do it, you don't do it because they told you that you're going to go to, to the deepest bowels of hell when you die. You do it because you're like, yeah, okay, I choose to do it.
I guess, in this spiritual, depending which spiritual growth, but especially in the Krishna consciousness, they have a higher purpose, right?
Purpose.
So they have a higher purpose for human beings, like something to take them out of the whole illusion and delusion, right? And it's great because in Krishna consciousness, you get to understand more about yourself and your destination, and, be present to, the condition of the human beings in this lifetime. It's very powerful. For me, it's really powerful. And it was such a powerful that actually I get to live in peace in my life, because I know that is a higher being, Krishna himself, and power of everything, and everything is under his control, and everything that I have is because of him. I just like it feels really, really good for me. And the same thing is association, organizations, or clubs run by human beings that is still subject to the imperfections of every human being.
Yes. Yeah.
That is the unfortunate thing.
Structures and Groups. It's the Structures of Organizations and Groups by Eric Byrne, that book. That applies to, it doesn't matter whether any human organization, they're all cults. They are all cults.
Yeah. So being aware, dealing with another human being could be, like elder than you, could have more experience than you in one area, which you look up to that person with a lot of awe and respect, is great. However, you must be aware that this human being also, he has the tendencies, the weaknesses of every human being. Maybe one area is where maybe in one area or two areas, the person is weaker than in other areas. It's still that person is weak in certain areas.
Or you might put it as they have blind spots.
Yeah, we can, using the landmark distinctions.
Or you might say they have anartas.
Yeah, anarta. So in the landmark term, we use it like there are distinctions, right? To discover your blind spots, why you've been running it's been running your years. Now, and Krishna consciousness is, as a human being, you have lifetimes over time, accumulated all of these anarthas that is playing up right now. And you are subject to make mistakes at any time. The moment that you have the ego and the moment that you have the mind that is tricking you at all the time, then you are subject to anything. Even being a really nice person, highly capable in one area, experienced and skilled in certain area, you still have those anarthas that is going to put you on your knees. That is the unfortunate thing. And as human beings, we must understand that, like, okay, I'm a human being, I'm full of anarthas. So this person, except that this person in this lifetime has a bit more strength, his karma or her karma is great in this area. Yet that person is in danger at any time, any moment.
Yeah, I mean, in the Christian Bible, in the New Testament, it says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God."
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita. It says there are two types of being, the Shara and the Akshara,
Mm-hmm.
the fallible and the infallible.
Mm-hmm.
You should know that all the living entities in this world are the Shara, the fallible.
Mm-hmm.
So, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, all living entities in this world are fallible. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that, no, there's this infallible person and everything they say, and then something doesn't go the way that you wanted it to. And it's not even necessarily because of some defect on the part of the person giving you the instruction. It may just be that you were attached to a particular outcome and you didn't get that outcome. Now you become upset.
Yeah. So if we're using those, if you're using the distinctions of the landmark forum, there is three things what happens why people are
Upset.
One is thwarted communication,
Thwarted intention.
thwarted intention,
Undelivered
communication, and
unfulfilled
expectation. So there are three things that this is really powerful. Actually, I really love this. Really, really love this. So if you're aware of these three things and you question yourself, what of those three
is the cause of
the cause of my upset or my discontent right now, then you can become powerful to the Lama Forum first. And you are so powerful that you know yourself, this is where I am, and this is the reason where I am, and then I'm going to take charge, powerful in this area, and your communication is so powerful and intended with the other person. There is the miscommunication or the upset with organization or whatever. Now, that is one thing if you are trained with these distinctions in the Landmark Forum. Now, it's another thing when the other party doesn't have any awareness of these distinctions, or maybe a little bit, but not really clearly, then it may create some issues for that party, right? But as long you are training that, you become one of those human beings that are powerful, not only to see your own anarthas, not only to check your own anarthas, to work in your own anarthas, and also you will be so powerful that you can recognize easily the anarthas of other person.
Yeah, well, technical point, you won't get that distinction in the Landmark Forum. That's not in the Landmark Forum.
The anarthas, you mean?
No, the three causes of upset.
All right. Well,
I don't know where you heard it. I think I overheard it as it was being created in something that you were in.
It was in the Landmark.
I know, it was in a Landmark program, but it's not in the Landmark Forum. If you go and do the 3.5-day Landmark Forum, that doesn't get covered in there.
I don't know, but anyways.
I heard it in a seminar.
Probably it's in the seminar, but it's well public. It's people can,
and as someone will say, they'll say, "Oh, you could get that stuff from a book." Sure, you can. If you want to read 1 million books, or you can just go to a thing where they've distilled it down.
Exactly. Yeah.
But to that point, that article in the New York Times, like if you look at it through that lens, you can see there's probably some thwarted intention, maybe, but it sounds like unfulfilled expectation there.
Well,
and
it could be a combination.
Yeah. But definitely undelivered communication. Now, if that lady had been able to communicate that and that had been gotten by the ashram leader, by, you know, people in that organization, but that communication was not listened. And so I looked at it and I was like, how did this happen, man? Someone got upset, and then like, because looking at it, because I look at it from two lenses, right? How does it get driven from below? And then if I look at it in the media thing, it's kind of like I analyze the media through Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent lens, which is the media exists to serve the interests of the elite, the political, financial, economic interests of the elite. So there's an agenda that fits with. That's from the top down. There's a macroscopic conspiracy theory that thing is part of. They have an agenda. But from the bottom, I was like, how's that driven? That's someone who is upset, and then what? Her father is like super politically connected and can, like, you know, ring someone at the New York Times and then make it happen. Like he's like some kind of major player and they didn't know. But whatever the case, that's a communication that, had it been delivered and been gotten by someone at some level of that organization, it would, and recreated, it would have disappeared, but it wasn't received. And so eventually it was like, drop the hammer.
Yeah. And there is two things here. One, the person wasn't powerful in communicating, and the other party was not able to listen to the person.
Yeah.
Or that person, the other party, have a listening of this party that didn't get resolved.
Yeah.
So it's just like two.
If we look at the media coverage of the devotees, the Hare Krishna devotees in Wellington, right? There you had the two things going on. You had like at the top level, they wanted, you know, these news stories about how these people who were protesting there were bad and wrong, rejects, refuse of society, right? River of filth. So that fit with their agenda. And then driving from the bottom up, you know, you had the person, you know, that they got to be the spokesperson against the Hare Krishnas participating there, supporting their agenda, you know, and he had his personal agenda that was driving it. So the two things, and his personal agenda was, we don't want to be associated with this and caught up in the backlash and get the bad publicity. And so those two agendas coalesce and then cause a news story to come out. So in the same way, these two agendas here have coalesced. Someone with an undelivered communication, upset, some unfulfilled expectation, thwarted intentions, and then some media agenda have coalesced and caused that newspaper story to come out. And the other thing that's very ironic about that is, part of the arguments against devotees chanting Hare Krishna in the Wellington occupation was it will lead to bad publicity. But in fact, the only bad publicity that was caused by that was actually generated by devotees opposing it. Otherwise, the reaction to it in the publicity and in all of the, you know, media coverage of it was uniformly positive. And has continued to be that way for 2 years. The only negative statements about devotees there were made by devotees in the press. And then it's ironic that some of the same devotees who are involved in that conversation then get caught up in this New York Times publicity thing. It's like big bad publicity thing there.
I know.
So to me, that just says, you know, don't be attached to the outcomes and calculate from them. Just do your duty, no matter what the cost. And in Kali Yuga, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam, Kirtaniya Sada Hare, just chant the holy name. It's the only way.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, like talking about these distinctions and how we can become powerful and
in our participation in a cult.
And not only in a participation in a cult, but in a relationship with yourself. I mean, with oneself.
Yep. So that's what I say is, as you go on with this, that's what I say constitutes your participation in a cult. It's your relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And how you can become very powerful in a relationship with yourself is, you know, one of my personal experiences is participating in the Landmark Forum, that they have these powerful distinctions to basically pierce through and crack the anarthas. And now that I'm way more aware of my anartha, I'm just like checking them, you know, being aware of them, always in the lookout for them. And that gives me the freedom not only to give myself the space and the love that I need from myself to myself,
Mhm.
that also let me see that other people I'm struggling with those too, with these anarthas.
Mm.
And perhaps some group of people or many people are in denial of it, pretending.
Mhm.
Other ones are, they do, but they don't know what is that they have.
Mhm.
They have a glimpse of an idea of it, but they cannot really like grasp it, like have it like, hands in front of your face.
Mhm.
So we need to understand that although Krishna consciousness is very powerful, it has the power to take us to many dimensions, to the spiritual sky. Right now, where we are in the material world, we're actually in a constant battle with ourselves.
Mhm.
And in order for us to help ourselves up, it's doing programs that actually will help you or assist you to see your anarthas, discover your anarthas, and be powerful in living life right now and changing your trajectory later on. Because the mind keeps going, the mind is
Yeah.
always busy.
That doesn't. After having observed the landmark programs for 10 years
Mhm.
and people's participation in them,
Mhm.
and having participated continuously in them myself for 6 years and then now again for a few months, my observation of that is it is not, and this would be obvious, immune to the same thing.
Obviously.
It requires powerful participation because how people participate in those programs determines the outcomes that they get from them.
Mhm.
And so there's a way to participate powerfully in those programs and a way to participate not powerfully in those programs,
Mhm.
like with all the levels of disempowerment, from going out, to the newspapers to say how it ruined your life, to just being like, well, it didn't really make that much of a difference for me. And then there are ways that you can take advantage of it that can make a large difference. But that's a whole other conversation. We should do that as another podcast episode.
Yeah, I think this is a very important conversation to have. And for people to have a little bit of like, taste of like different methodologies that can help us in recognizing our anarthas
Mhm.
and dealing with them powerfully.
Okay, let's do that in another episode. Let's go to some of the comments here.
Mm-hmm.
Murari Das, who obviously came late, said, most don't use the word cult in the same way Srila Prabhupada did. First, define your definition of the word. Well, Prabhu, if you watched earlier and watch our previous episode, I assert that they do use it the same way that he did, and it's a psychological operation to demonize the word and to disempower people's participation in cults and to make it invisible to them that they are participating in a cult right now.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are always in a cult. So if you're not in the Kṛṣṇa cult, you're in some other cult. But go back and watch our other episode and watch the beginning of this one, perhaps. Hare Krishna to Anil Demon, and we got like a bunch of comments from Tim Mowick. Okay, let's have a look. Ready? We'll go all the way down from the top of the stream.
Sure.
I don't know anyone who knew what they were getting into with KC. Okay. For me, it was more a mystical and mysterious process, the religious awakening. I know many devotees who believed the Bhagavad Gita before they finished reading it. Yeah, okay. That's interesting because in the Bhagavad Gita itself, at the beginning, Srila Prabhupada in the introduction says the way of understanding the Gita is given in the Gita itself by the way that Arjuna understands it.
Mm-hmm.
He accepts Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead. Therefore, one should at least theoretically accept Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead.
At least.
Yeah, theoretically. So it's not about believing it. It's about taking it on, trying it on as a hypothesis to understand the Gita as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. no belief required. This is an interesting topic. In one sense, it seems like you're suggesting the responsibility of the guru, temple, the religious institution to take care of all the different needs of the devotees throughout their progression through life, including things like helping them transition into a career, find a partner, etc. The question is, how does the responsibility of the guru, temple, institution extend? Is it meant to be full service? I understand in large church communities, in the worldview of the church, is to fulfill many of these functions. As soon as you start looking to the institution to manage investment funds for devotees, it's going to get really messy really fast, with a lot of surface area of corruption and allegations of such. So, I mean, here's the thing. The point here is, this is not like taking money from the devotees and managing it. It's like they're like have devotees working at the restaurant, for example, and they pay them, you know, depending on how they pay them according to the model, but they have like, they'll bring a brahmachari over from overseas and have them work. This was a big scandal in Australia. It got into the newspaper because someone got upset and weaponized it. I actually invented this strategy, but someone else executed it. I didn't execute it, but I actually presented it in a GBC meeting in Australia and said, guys, this is a risk surface area. Yeah, they would bring over someone from overseas, have them work for 3 years to get their permanent residency, and then they would submit a letter to the immigration department saying that they paid them X amount of thousands of dollars per year, 45,000 or whatever, when in fact they had not. But the person who was getting the PR didn't mind because they were getting PR in Australia out of this deal. So they didn't say anything about it. But then what happened was one devotee there, lots of devotees became upset actually, but one devotee became upset. Another devotee became upset who was a lawyer who was in the meeting where I presented this strategy, and she went and executed it. She found that the PR devotee who was upset and then brought it as a case, and it became a whole thing. So the point there is that they have devotees, people doing service and doing activities, working for minimum wage or less than minimum wage, and then they're bringing money in, which they're then spending on stuff, whatever that stuff might be, you know, and it's very opaque what the money gets spent on in a lot of cases. Where did all the money go? But what I'm saying is some of that money should be in a responsible kind of institution, would be earmarked for, you know, basically like employee super fund. And that's how the government, you know, socialist government, this other, you know, which is part of this other cult at the moment, particularly, has structured the larger thing. So if they want to have their own, they just have to own up to that. That's a cult. This is a cult. They're being responsible for their cult members, you know, situations. Until, of course, they can't pay out the superannuation, at which point they need to, you know, as we're seeing now. So I wasn't talking about like managing investment funds for devotees. I was talking about managing some kind of fund. That's just the model that the government has used, you know, especially in Australia. And I think here as well. Yeah, KiwiSaver is the same thing. Yeah. You put money into these investment portfolios. It's a whole money laundering scheme as well for the government, but that's a different topic. It's a debate between a socialist model versus a libertarian one of personal responsibility and the degrees between. Yeah, it's kind of like the interaction between the two. They always coexist at the same time. Some degree of it, you know, like even a family, you know, you're responsible for your children. It's a kind of a socialist model, right? From each according to their means, and to each according to their needs. That's what a family is with children. The little kid can't, you know, make money, so he does what he can do, and then he gets what he needs. So from each according to their means, and to each according to their needs. Socialist. But at the same time, you want that child to develop personal responsibility, so you have both. Yeah. You don't want them to be a child.
The pleasure of being parent.
Yeah. If you create an organization that helps people, you attract people who need help. Yeah, it's a fact. Manipulate people, but be responsible for those you manipulate. Yeah, it's like you can't avoid it. Like even if you've ever been in a managerial role in a corporation, they come down to you and they say, this is what we're going to be doing. You need to sell this to the employees. And then the employees are like, we're not happy about this. And you need to spin it. So that they are happy about it. I remember one time I got like involved in the enterprise bargaining agreement in Australia for a corporation. So
Mhm.
in Australia, they got many different states and they all have different state awards, you know, so different people doing the same job in different states will be paid different rates, and they'll also be paid different like overtime rates. There are different things for holidays, all that kind of stuff, award rates, because there are unions in the different states. And so to simplify the operation of, you know, corporations that span the country, they can negotiate a collective agreement or an enterprise agreement with all of their employees, which supersedes the individual state award level. So instead of having, you know, if you're in 6 states, having 6 different things to manage, you just manage one. And so there was, to do that, you had to have this enterprise bargaining process, and then you had to have like a representative from the employees as part of that, and then like the owners or the managers or whatever. So I got roped into the position, or put my hand up or whatever, for being the employee bargaining person. But then it got to a certain point where they were like, you know, like part of that original one was that the first time it happened when I was involved was that it had to be the same or better than the award rates. But even with that, people were complaining about aspects of it, and employees wanted to like go to war, you know, with management over aspects of it. And then I'm in this conversation there, and then they're saying to me like, listen, if we don't get this over, then the you know, the multinational, the international arm is going to relocate these job functions to another country. So we need to, you know, in order to continue to supply jobs to people here and to keep expanding, we need to do this. Now, are they telling me the truth, or are they spinning something on me? I don't know, but I got to go now to the employees and spin this thing on them and say, guys, you know, let's get with the program here and make this thing happen. So yeah, you're going to, you know, manipulate people. You're going to be manipulated, and you have to be responsible for that. You're being manipulated and that you're manipulating people. So it stops when you are that, like, it's all spin. It's all spin. The story of the statistics and the, we have to do this in order to, you know, save the world and save your grandma, and that it's all propaganda. And you have to stop and go, I'm being manipulated. And then you have to take individual personal responsibility. Anything you want to say about that? Or manipulate people, and when it goes off the rails, convince them that they need to take responsibility for their choices. No, my point is, like I said to that devotee who showed up and said, no, I'm here because Gurudev told me to come here. It's like people are responsible for their choices at the very beginning. Not that when they leave and they go, I was in a cult and I was brainwashed and I'm not responsible for anything that I did.
Everybody else to blame.
Yeah, it's like, dude, like allowing people to participate like that is like, that's cult brainwashing, man. Cult brainwashing. And allowing yourself to be like that, you're a brainwashed member of a cult. When you understand that you're in a cult and that you're being manipulated and you're being spun 6 ways from Sunday, you can powerfully participate and you can be responsible for your participation. If you think that you're not in a cult, you are fully brainwashed. Fully brainwashed.
Yeah. I don't think the whole point here is about manipulating people and convincing them, you know, that then, what was the thingy? Convincing them they're not manipulated or take responsibility for the choices. It's like, we have to be very clear from the beginning. Like you say, you know, with this person, you ask a simple question.
Why are you here?
Why are you here? You know what I mean? So having this mature conversation saying, why are you here? And if the person is not fully aware, have more conversations so the person can be way more aware. And I said, this is what happens. Having a very open conversation from the beginning, it actually sets the person to be responsible at every step what their choices are, why they're choosing that. And that doesn't become a problem at the end. They don't turn around and say, you make me do this. Like, in other words, playing the victim. And the leader should do. It would be required from a leader to make the person aware from the beginning what they're getting themselves into. If they are fully aware what they're doing, and create a plan to maybe every month checkup, you know, maybe a yearly checkup or whatever, every 3 monthly checkup, you know, what's happening. so that the leader not only is showing the leadership and the care for people, the interest of the people, also is showing the other person how to take responsibility from the beginning when you get yourself into something. It's like developing another leader, training another person in leadership by you yourself. I don't mean you, but
No, I get it.
by the leader himself or herself from the beginning, being very frank with this person.
Mm.
So it's a both ways. You're training the person to be a leader to this one, and this person is gaining a leadership skills from you. It's like it's what do you call it? It's a symbiotic relationship.
Mm.
But if you don't do that, it's basically just feels take, and little breadcrumbs given to the person, so he's satisfied with that.
Mm.
And that is not leadership for me. I don't see that as a leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it's like disempowering people and having people disempowered in their participation as a retention strategy. Rather than the way in this company that I worked at for 10 years, they were like, we want our people to go out and make the difference in the industry. People are going to go out from here and they're going to like empower everything that's happening out there. And then, they might even come back, and they're always welcome to come back.
Yeah.
And they had that attitude towards it, rather than like, we want people to stay and we're going to, hobble them in order to keep them.
Yeah. And the other thing about the leadership thing as well, it's honor the person for what the person is given.
Can you give an example of that?
Like a person is given 1 month of the time, let's say serving Krishna, but you still will need to honor the person for the sacrifice, for their commitment, for their contribution.
Mm.
That person not only will learn to love himself or herself, that person will learn from that leader how to be a leader and honoring another human being.
Mm.
And that is something that I see is missing. Acknowledging them, honoring them, giving like a love reciprocation that could be in money, that could be in whatever, But this person, when they out of this training, they feel like, you know what, it was a worthwhile, and I want everybody else in the world to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's some more comments from Tim.
Mm-hmm.
I just read the NY Times article, Devamrita Swami Wellington in the spotlight. Yeah. Statistics are not only spin, though they can be. Statistics data is the basis of a lot of scientific knowledge.
Depending.
Well, okay, just for the first sentence, statistics are not only spin, though they can be. There's lies, Dan lies, and statistics. And I think it was Winston Churchill. He said, the only statistics that I believe are the ones that we invent ourselves. Statistics data is the basis of a lot of scientific knowledge. That's a common misconception. But like, to really unpack that, what scientific knowledge really is, the best book to read about that is The Case for Reality by David Deutsch, who is the father of quantum computing. And is it The Case for Reality? Or am I mixing it up with The Case Against Reality by Donald Hoffman? I'll find the book. It's by David Deutsch. I'll find it right now. Anyway, it talks about Karl Popper, and so it's David Deutsch, Karl Popper, and the philosophical basis of science. Most people don't understand the philosophical basis of science and how it works. And lots of people would actually let's have a look. The fabric of reality, it's called the fabric of reality. And there might be a counter argument against how he presents it in the fabric of reality and Popperian science.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can bring it up here. Yeah, okay, so we go to StreamYard, and then I'll go present, share a screen, window, Brave tab, here we go. Yeah, so the fabric of, so a new integrated rational worldview based on 4 main strands: quantum physics and its many universes interpretation, the Everett interpretation. This is why I read the book, because Prahlad had watched Simpsons or something, and they mentioned quantum physics or quantum mechanics, and he said, "What's quantum mechanics?" And I couldn't explain it to him. So I read a ton of books on it. This was the best one. But this one here, this part, the theory of knowledge, so it has evolution, computation, and the theory of knowledge, Karl Popper, understanding, explanation, and understanding. It's the result of taking seriously the deepest ideas of modern science and the philosophy of science. It talks about quantum, so quantum theory, but the very first one is this one here, the epistemology, and Karl Popper and the theory, the philosophical basis of science. So statistics and data is not the basis of a lot of scientific knowledge. It's not the basis of it. Statistics and data can give you like that. What that plays into is it plays into hypothesis generation, and it plays into like ideas of interesting things. Well, we observed this, so what could possibly be at the cause of this? And then you start to generate hypotheses. Then you start to generate experiments, to test those hypotheses, and you can use statistics and data for that. But scientific knowledge and understanding, you can have statistics till the cows come home without having scientific understanding, because it's just like you can generate any kind of theory out of statistics, and that's what they've done. And then the way they collect the statistics, the way the statistics are shaped, anyway, it's a whole thing. And specifically to the COVID thing, I did the analysis of how the statistics are collected and everything. It's just like it's more consistent with a fraud than it is with, anyway, it was consistent with what they wanted it to be consistent with, man, which is dealing with a number of issues, one of which is the inversion of the demographic pyramid and the superannuation problem.
Okay.
And where they want the world to go next. The NY Times article is not unfairly written, in my opinion. It had 26 times it had Krishna's name in there. Now I better understand where this how to participate in a cult topic is coming from. It wasn't actually generated from that article. That article was just if you want to know where it's coming from that book, Is This a Cult? About Ann L. Peterson, former wisdom course leader and staff member at Landmark. Isn't it Krishna's place to fulfill the devotee, i.e. service is its own reward? Yeah, it is. And then there's also like the dharma of the Kshatriyas, particularly, their dharma is to protect the praja, or the children, which means the dependent living entities. So that's just that is itself a specific dharma or devotional service. But in pure devotional service, but obviously people are not doing pure devotional service because later on they complain. Statistics explain the behavior of a large system, not just individual nodes within. They give a view not available to individual observation. A lot can be learned from. Without a doubt. But then, there's that meme, which is like, it says, hang on, let me find it. Meme, and it's about statistics. Let's try this one. Knowledge, information. Yes. Here it is, this one. So there's this one here, which is it this? Yes, this one. This one here. You got data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, and then conspiracy theory. And so I made another version of this, and it said data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, and then pandemic. So if they're used for generating a hypothesis, and then in good faith, you're trying to derive, ideas about something, and then if you want to understand what you're looking at, you have to create experiments with rigorous experimental design, and then carry out those experiments to validate whether your interpretation or your intuition or your insight or your hypothesis matches, and then you're trying to invalidate it. But statistics in and of themselves are simply large collections of data sets, and then there's all the question of how they were created and everything. I don't know how we got onto statistics. How did we get onto statistics?
Because he mentioned about statistics.
No, but he must have mentioned it because I mentioned it.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, so statistics are not spin, but anything that you say about statistics is spin. And that's why politicians regularly, when statistics are used in scientific experiments and in science, yeah, there's a whole framework that goes around it.
Mhm.
But what they present to the general population is like, they just throw these numbers out. I talked about it on the Namras podcast in 2021
Mhm.
about statistics and the way they were being used, and that simply to state a number has no meaning in and of itself.
Mhm.
But then, of course, they use it to support the propaganda. And anyway, it's a whole thing. So those are the comments. Anything you want to say to complete? There's a landmark term for you. What would you like to say in summation at the end of this episode?
I don't know. You start. I will finish it.
Okay, how to powerfully participate in the Krishna cult. You have to be responsible for your individual participation, including if you don't want to be responsible for your individual participation. If you're like, I'm deliberately choosing to not be responsible because I want to have the experience of being like a child and having parents. And then, I'm hoping that I'm going to have good parents and they're going to take care of me and I'm going to fully surrender to them. And that's what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And then when you do that, it's like, and then I'm going to do the due diligence, or I'm not going to do the due diligence. Then you're just being straight up about what you're doing.
And be aware that that has effects.
If you approach it that way?
Yeah. Everything has an effect.
Yeah.
Positive or negative. So, like you say, like you can be a child. For sure, you can behave and be like a child. The effect of that is people will treat you as a child.
People take advantage of you.
People will take advantage of you, and you will be disrespected.
And you're probably not going to be happy at the end.
No, definitely not. And then they won't take you seriously. They will be basically treated as like you a burden.
Yeah, and the socialist cult that is constituting the majority of society right now is encouraging people to approach it in that way. You don't have to think, you just do, and what we tell you.
Do whatever you want.
Not do whatever you want. Do what we tell you to do. We'll take care of everything. We're in charge of everything. You just basically give us all your money, and we will spend it and provide you with everything through the taxations, And then, oh man, the tax is unbelievable, and it's just that there's no way to reverse it, because you've created this organism that just takes more and more tax money, and there's no way that it's going to reduce the taxes. They're just going to find more and more things to spend it on, like including just giving money to other countries and stuff. It's crazy. But yeah, approaching the socialist cult in the way that people are, no one has ever done that and then ended up with a country or a government that they wanted at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with approaching these cults in this way. I mean, I don't really know of people who have, there might be very few people who kind of fully surrender to the thing, and then, but yeah, the potential for the human organism is just not designed like that. Human society is designed around the family unit and then boundaries around it. And for individuals as well, you need to have a boundary and a locus of control that's within that boundary. And then in your participation in any system you participate in, your locus of control remains located within you and within Krishna consciousness. You say, Krishna is within my heart. And people are like, oh, you need to do this, or Krishna. It's like, Krishna is within my heart. He's closer to me than anything else. He's not out there. He's not, you don't have a monopoly on Krishna. Krishna is within my heart. And then when you participate in that way, you're responsible for your participation. If everybody's responsible for their participation, mistakes will be made, but the implications of them are much reduced. It's like in a boat, they have those bulwarks, they're called, which are doors that seal shut, and they can seal entire sections. And they have them all throughout the whole ship. So when it gets a hole in it, they just seal these doors, and then only one section of the ship floods. So Krishna's system is designed around the family as the unit of protection of the individual. And so, creating a kind of like a communistic cult structure where people surrender all of their things to some kind of like socialist type thing, it doesn't scale. It works very well for very small, like basically like a small family. It doesn't scale up much more than that.
Yeah, I guess like the word responsibility may be a bit heavy for people to hear it, right?
People do not want responsibility.
No.
Or accountability.
No, they don't. They actually are resistant and what do you call this one?
Evasive.
Yeah, avoidant, evasive, and resistant to that.
To responsibility.
To responsibility and accountability. But when you are responsible and accountable, you become one of these joyful, happy, and powerful human beings than a complaining, whinging victim. That you're not happy and people around you aren't happy, aren't empowered, and they're not enjoying their experience, maybe with your presence. So it's a matter of choice, right? What do you choose? To be a responsible and accountable person, or do you become, or you choose to be this complaining, whinging, and victim person?
And
it's a choice. At the end of the day, it's a choice, and whatever you choose, it has an effect. This side, the victim choice, is basically you will live a life powerless and happiness. You don't have power. Certain areas of your life may be good, but you know what? Your self-esteem, your sense of enjoyment, the sense of yourself is not there. It's unfulfilled. But in here, you become this person that has the power to choose, and you have a life that is lively, expansive, joyful. Yeah. Anyways, that's me.
Okay, great. And let's do like a Hare Krishna perspective on the Landmark Forum in the next one.
Oh, let's do it.
But yeah, let's end with this. This is from Tim. He said, "For me, it was more a mystical and mysterious process, the religious awakening. And then, and that for me has been my experience of it. It is a mystical path. And then when people build these human organizations around it, these cults, it has all the deficiencies and defects, and you have to be buyer beware, caveat emptor of what you're getting into. But the heart of it is a mystical, mysterious process, the religious awakening.
If things are done properly, you will get that.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the comments, the conversation, and see you in the next episode where we're going to do a Hare Krishna perspective on the Landmark Forum. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Total world victory of Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna. It's taking a while.
Here we are setting up the green screen at the beginning of the show. That was crazy.
Yeah.
It's having some trouble ending the stream by the look of it. Let's roll the credits while we're waiting then.
Okay, why not?
Oh no, it says having trouble connecting.
Oh no. We having trouble. Many trouble.
Outro. Here we go. We'll play Gaura's music.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare